Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, resuming our discussions on the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we will resume from verse 41. Brahman Kshatriya Vishama Shudranam Cha Parantapa Karmani Pravibhaktani Swabhava Prabhaver Gunahe. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes. O chastiser of enemy. So, quickly summing that how we came to this point, uh, in summarizing the first six and the last six verses, chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about the influence of the modes of material nature on us. Right? So, uh, in the 18th chapter, and this is from verse 19 to 40, Krishna had talked about six aspects of our existence and how they vary based on the modes. So he spoke about knowledge, action, performers of actions, understandings, determination, and happiness. And then in the 17th chapter, he has spoken about five other things that are also impacted by the modes, which is faith, food, sacrifice, austerity, the threefold austerity of body, mind, and speech, and charity. Now, bear in mind that it's not just that these 11 things are impacted by the modes, but Krishna speaks about them because they're prominent and they determines one's uh, uh, the way that one is conducting one's life, the kind of food that they eat, the kind of faith that they have, the kind of actions that they perform. But practically speaking, every existence of one's life is impacted by the modes. Now, from this section onwards, Krishna is going to be helping us escape from this modes. And in doing so, he will talk about the famous yoga ladder. So he will begin from the bottommost rung, which is Sakam Karma. So the bottommost rung of the ladder is essentially Varnashram. So Varnashram is one acting according to one's Varna and Ashram based on the injunctions of the scriptures. Now, how do the modes correlate to the Varnas? There is essentially a direct mapping between the modes and the Varnas. For instance, the person in the mode of goodness is will live as a Brahman. So, now having established that one's Varna is a direct consequence of the modes in which one lives, the Varnas are also a way to escape the modes. Because based on the Varnas, the scriptures have given us a set of prescribed duties. These prescribed duties are in accordance the to the intrinsic modes of that particular Varna, but also contain within them the ability to transcend the modes. So you see the potency of the process. That if one is in the mode of ignorance predominantly, the Varna that corresponds to it is Shudra. Corresponds to Shudra, there is prescribed activities. When the Shudra performs those prescribed activities, then he becomes elevated from the modes. Right? So this way, the person then begins to climb up the rungs of the yoga ladder, and as they climb higher and higher, they are progressively liberated from the modes. So let's go ahead and look at a little bit more details of these modes or the activities in this modes. Verse 42. Shamodamastapah saucham kshantir achavameva cha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma swabhavacham. peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. So, in describing the Varnashram, Krishna first begins with the Varna of the Brahmanas. Verse 42. Shamodamastapah shaucham shantirajavamev cha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahmakarma swabhavajam. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. So, Krishna is now describing the qualities of the Brahmanas. And he describes in this verse 8 qualities. So, Sama is peacefulness, which essentially means control of the senses, the more the internal senses, control of the mind and its desires. Then Dhamma is the control of external senses. So controlling the internal senses gives peacefulness, and controlling the external senses gives self-control. Then Tapa is austerity, which is voluntarily undergoing hardships. So the Brahmins, they will voluntarily undergo hardships like taking cold water baths, abstaining from different kinds of foods, uh, living a simple life. So that's the quality of the Brahmanas, Tapa. Saucham is cleanliness. So Brahmins are internally and externally clean. So external cleanliness is by taking 3 baths a day, by wearing simple but clean garments. Internal cleanliness is by chanting the purifying mantras. Then Shanti is tolerance. So tolerance to both pleasing and distressing conditions. Arjavam is honesty. So the Brahmanas are known for being truthful, straightforward. They are sincere, harmonious. They are not duplicitous. Jnanam is that they have the knowledge of the Vedas. They have the knowledge of matter and spirit. Vijnanam means that they have wisdom, which means that the knowledge that they have, they practice and they get realization on it. And this is important that Brahmanas, they not only read the Vedas, they also practice what they have read in the Vedas. That is why the Gyan is accompanied with Vigyan. And Astikyam is religiousness, which is their conviction to follow the scriptures. So ultimately, the Brahminican actions are directed to understanding the Supreme Lord, and these actions are conducive to them. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Verse 43. Shauryam tejutirdaksham yudhe chapya palayanam dhanam ishvara bhavascha kshatram karma swabhavascham. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. So, 5 qualities are described. Courage is Shauryam. So, Kshatriyas by nature are courageous. Then, Teja. So, Teja means confidence, it also means self assurance, because the, the, the duty of this Varna is to rule, so that they display that confidence. Then Dhriti is fortitude. So fortitude means that they have the resilience to uh, take care of adversities, specifically physical adversities, whether it comes to dealing with enemies, dealing with spies, dealing with the, other Kshatriyas. So they have that Dhriti. Then Ishwar Bhava, because Ishwar Bhava means controlling tendency. Right? So Kshatriyas have, again, because they are the ruling class, they dominate. So they dominate all the other three Varnas. And the fifth is Daksham Yudhe, with courage in battle. So the Kshatriyas are famous for going into battle even if the conditions are adverse. That one who follows Kshatriya Dharma will not flee from a battle even if they determine that the enemy is more powerful than them, or if their victory is or the defeat is assured, they will still fight with the same amount of courageousness. So the Kshatriyas are prominently in the Rajaguna, with Satoguna being a secondary quality. Previously, we had seen the Brahmanas; they were prominently in the Satogun, right? Kshatriyas in the mixed mode, with Rajogun being prominent and Satogun being secondary. Moving on to the next verse, verse 44. ऋषिगोरक्षवाणिज्यं वैश्यकर्मस्वभावजं परिचार्यात्मकं कर्म शूद्रस्यापि स्वभावजम्. Farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas, and for the Shudras, there are labor and service to others. So, this verse describes the qualities of the Vaishyas and the Shudras. So, the Vaishyas are predominantly in the mode of Rajas, with Tamo being the secondary guna, and their occupation is three kinds: farming, cow protection, and commerce. And it is said that uh, there is a sequence, or there is a order of superiority. The highest are the Vaishyas who engage in cow protection. Second are those who engage in farming, and in business there is also those who end up whose business is commerce, which is trading, and then those whose business is money lending. So the ones who engage in commerce are higher, and the lowest are those who are uh, money lenders. Right. So for the Vaishyas, the sequence is cow protection, farming, commerce, and lending. The Shudras, their predominant quality is is paricharya. Paricharya means service. Service to whom? Service to the other three varnas, to the Brahmanas, Vaishyas, and Kshatriyas. So we see that uh, Krishna has given us 8 qualities for the Brahmanas, 5 qualities for the Kshatriyas, 3 qualities for the Vaishyas, and 1 quality for the Shudra. Next, he will talk about the importance of recognizing and acting according to these qualities. So say karmani abhiratah samsiddhim labate naraha swakarma nirata siddhim yadha vindati tachnu. Verse 45. Sve sve karmanya abhiratah samsiddhim labhate narah swakarma niratah siddhim yatha vindati tachrunu. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. So the next verses are very critical for an understanding of the reason that Krishna has put the Varnashram system in place. Right? So here he gives a summation that when one acts according to the Varna, one becomes perfect. And he says qualities of work, which translates to that by the Varna that the person has acquired based on the modes in which they are, they execute work of a certain quality. Right? And the quality was described in the preceding verses. And the importance is that in doing so, the person becomes perfect. So a Shudra, simply by serving others, acquires the same level of perfection that a Brahmana will do in observing all the 8 qualities that Krishna had outlined. That's the glory of the Varnashram. Now, of course, the perfection for a Shudra is to move to a higher Varna, and the perfection of a Brahman is to attain liberation. So, the perfection is contextual, but nevertheless, the process of Varnashram is established for the purpose of the practitioner to ascend the modes. Okay, next verse. यतः प्रवृत्तिर्भूतानां येन सर्वमिदं ततं स्वकर्मण तत् अभ्यर्चया सिद्धिं विन्दति मानवः. Verse 47. Shreyan swadharma vigunaha paradharmat swanushtitat swabhavaniyatam karma kurvannapnoti kilbisham. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. So, this is an important verse and also one that is often misquoted as showing support to caste system. So, essentially, what Krishna is saying here is that one should stay in one's varna and not try to act according to another varna. Right? Because based on the previous set of verses, Krishna had said that how the Brahmanas are most well suited to make spiritual advancements. Then Arjun might say, then why should one be Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra? Why should not everybody strive to be a Brahman? And Krishna says the reason is that one acquires a varna based on one's swabhav, which is essentially a, a combination of the modes that the person is. And because one's swabhav is difficult to change, one should stay with the varna. Now, what is the advantage? That that na apnoti kilbhisham, that the person is not infected with the sinful reactions. So, for instance, a Shudra, in following the instructions of the master, will not be will not accrue any sinful reactions, even though the master may be asking him to do sinful activities, because his duty is to follow the other varnas. Right? So, as long as he's doing it, he's following his dharma. A Kshatriya will not accrue sinful reactions for killing, because that is their own varna, but a Brahmana will. So, staying in one's varna will protect one from the inevitable sinful activities that are performed in the execution of the duties. Now, the reason I say this verse is controversial is because when Krishna is saying that your varna is what you're fixed in, people will say that essentially Krishna is supporting the caste system, which says something very similar, that you're in this particular caste and you stay in that caste. But there is an important difference, that Krishna says that one's varna is based on one's swabhav. It is not based on one's birth. Right? In the caste system, it is said that a Brahmana parents will have a Brahmana child, and Krishna never makes that assertion. Right? He has nothing to do with the occupation of the parents. Right? He says based on one's own propensity, one acquires a varna. Now, the second aspect of not going away from your varna, so one can understand that uh, because the varnas are predicated on one's propensity, one stays with it. But look at the example that Krishna is giving. Right? So even if one performs the activities of another varna perfectly and is performing the activities of their own varna imperfectly, they should stay in that varna. So one may say that doesn't the ability to perform activities perfectly or imperfectly a reflection of one's propensity? That if a Shudra is performing the duties of a Brahmanas perfectly and that of a Shudra imperfectly, does not that mean that he is actually a Brahman? So there are two ways to understand this. One is by understanding this to be what is known as Kim Uta Nyaya. So Kim Ut Nyaya essentially means what if. It's the logic of what if, which basically means that um, uh, one exaggerates for impact. Like in the ninth chapter, Krishna says that apichet sudurachar bhajante mam ananyapa. That even if my devotee performs sinful activities, right? And acharyas say that how can a devotee perform sinful activities? But Krishna uses this as an example to show the potency of devotional service. That even if the devotees perform sinful activities, they should be considered to be devotional. So here Krishna is uh, is using the Kimutta Nyaya to say that even if the person is performing the activities of another Varna perfectly, he should not leave his own Varna. Okay? The second way of understanding is that the the perfection is transient. So when Krishna says, even if that one is performing the activities of Varna perfectly, another Varna perfectly, the implicit understanding is that that may be driven by circumstances, by pressures of time. The person is temporarily performing the duties of another Varna perfectly. Right. So circumstantially, we see that how Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Ashwathama, Parshuram, these are all Brahmins, but they they were they were warriors. Right? So they these were Brahmins acting as Kshatriyas. Now they are not condemned because they were not transiently acting in that role. So Dronacharya, right from the beginning, he was a warrior. He fought in the battlefield. It's not that when Mahabharata was fought, Drona said, "I'm a Brahman. I should not fight." Right? He was fought, and when he was killed, then there was no sin of Brahmahatya. Right? For a Kshatriya, one of the biggest sin is Brahmahatya, killing a Brahman. But when Dronacharya was killed, or when Arjun tried to attack Ashwathama, he is not infected by the sin of Brahmatyas. Right? So these are cases where, on a more permanent basis, one varna was translated to another. But there can also be cases when the transition may be inspired by temporary events, and that is what Krishna is discouraging. Like there is a case of Vishwamitra who, because of certain circumstances, ate the meat of a dog, which is essentially even below a Shudra, an activity of a Chandal. But that does not mean that Vishwamitra became a Chandal. He continued to be a Brahman. But circumstantially, he was acting according to a different Varna. In the Ramayana, there is the pastime or the case of Shambhuka. So Shambhuka was a Shudra, and but he was very egoistical and very ambitious. So he saw that the Brahmanas, because of the Brahma Tejas, were powerful. So, driven by his greed for power, he began to perform austerity. So, first he went and approached different gurus, and they rejected him. And then, on his own, he began to perform austerities. And because of this sin of a Shudra acting like a Brahman, during the reign of Lord Ram, rain stopped falling, and there was a Brahman whose child died. So the Brahman immediately went and chastised Lord Ram, saying that I am sinless, but because I am also inheriting your sins, undoubtedly you have performed some sins. So then Lord Ram immediately got onto his horse and he started wandering around the kingdom to see where under his rule sins were allowed to be committed. He came to this place where Shambhuka was performing austerities, and without hesitation, Lord Ram, he cut the head of Shambhuka. So as soon as Shambhuka's head was cut off, it started raining, and Lord Ram revived the dead boy of the Brahman. So the reason that Shambhuka was killed by Lord Ram was not because Lord Ram was envious of a Shudra trying to be a Brahman, but he realized that the only reason that Shambhuka wanted to be a Brahman was to to take revenge on the Brahmanas, to acquire power. So all the qualities that are intrinsic to the Brahman, Shambhuka lacked. Right. So considering this, Krishna in this verse is discouraging people from whimsically changing varnas. So one should not say that, okay, now, today, tomorrow onwards, I will only study the scriptures, so I'm a Brahman. So the Kshatriya is reluctant to engage in battle. So as soon as the battle comes, he becomes a Brahman. When the battle finishes, then he becomes a Kshatriya again. And if there is opportunity for commerce, he becomes a Vaishya. So Krishna is strongly discouraging that tendency. This is also a hint for Arjun. And so Arjun wanted to go to the forest and become a beggar. But because Arjun is a Kshatriya, he can, or it is recommended that he can not give up his Varna of being a Kshatriya. Let's go to the next verse. Verse 48. Sajam karma kaunteya sadosham apina tyajet sarvaram doshena dhumena. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. So, in the previous verse, Krishna made the case that one should stay in their own varnas because the varnas are allocated based on one's swabha. So, if one says that I want to be a Brahman, if they don't have the quality of being a Brahman, then they will fail in both their own Varna and the Brahmanical Varna. Now, Arjun might say that, but if my Varna has faults in it, then what is the harm in me moving to another Varna? If I am a Kshatriya and as a Kshatriya I am expected to kill, then what is the harm in me becoming a Brahman where there is no need for this kind of violence? So Krishna is saying that every Varna has some fault. The Brahmanas have to sacrifice animals. The Kshatriyas have to commit violence. The Vaishyas have to lie as part of their commerce. And the Shudras have to follow instructions, even if they are imperfect or sinful. So one should not whimsically identify faults in one Varna and use that as an excuse to move to another Varna. So this is actually a reflection in what Arjun was trying to do. That as a Kshatriya, it is a Kshatriya dharma to fight with vigor and kill, whether they are his friends or enemies, in the pursuance of dharma. But what he is saying is that such killing is causing me anxiety, so better for me to become a renunciate, better for me to become a Brahman. But then if he was to really become a Brahman, even that Varna has faults in it. So between the previous two verses, Krishna is making this point that the real purification lies in one following the duties that are prescribed for your Varnas. Right, so Krishna presents it both ways. In the earlier verses, he spoke about how by following your Varna, you are protected by the sinful reactions that accompany that Varna. Because essentially the duties are given by Krishna. So not only are you protected from the sinful reactions of the activities in the Varna, you also make spiritual advancement. And the converse side of it is that if you give up your Varna whimsically, then you are no longer protected from the sinful activities, the reaction of the sinful activities in the Varna, and you no longer make any spiritual advancements because you're going against the instructions of Krishna. So, with this verse, Krishna concludes his description of the bottom rung of the yoga ladder, which is Sakam Karma, which essentially is performing prescribed duties according to your propensity, but with a desire to enjoy. Now, Krishna will move to the higher rungs of the yoga ladder. Okay, so we're moving to the next verse. Verse 49. असक्त बुद्धि सर्वत्र जितात्मा विगतस्वर नैष्कर्म्य सिद्धिं परमां सन्निसनादिगच्छति. One who is self-controlled and unattached, and who disregards all material enjoyments, can obtain by practice of renunciation the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. So, with this verse, Krishna begins the new rung of the yoga ladder, which is Nishkam. In the previous set of verses, it spoke about Sakam, the perfection of which was following the prescribed duties according to your Varnashram. Now, he is talking about going to a higher stage, which is performing your prescribed duties but being unattached. Right? So he says that asakta buddhi sarvatra. Right? So having an unattached intelligence everywhere. Then jitatma, having control of the mind. Right? So jitatma, viktaspara or jitatma in a way represents uh, sakam karma, because prescribed duties means that you have control on the mind and senses. So essentially, nishkam karma is subsumes sakam karma. So in sakam karma, the recommendation was perform your prescribed duties. In nishkam karma, the recommendation is perform your prescribed duties, but without attachment to the fruits of the duties or to the duty themselves. Right. So here Krishna is now taking Arjun to the next stage in the yoga ladder, which is Nishkam Karma. Let's go to the next verse. Verse 50. Siddhim prapta yatha brahma tathapnoti nibodhami samsa saneva kaunteya समासनेव कौन्तेय निष्ठज्ञानस्य या para. O son of Kunti, learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection can attain the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. So now Krishna is going to the next rung of the yoga ladder, which is Brahman realization. So he says that learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection. So what is the perfection he's talking about? That which he spoke about in the previous verse, which is Nishkam Karma. So Nishkam Karma is not a resting stage in itself. It is one that propels the jiva to the next stage. So having attained the perfection of Nishkam Karma, Krishna says that such a person will then reach the stage of Brahman realization. Right? And then he will explain the how to in the next set of verses. So Brahman realization is when one is explicitly working to make spiritual advancements. So far in Sakam Karma and Nishkam Karma, the focus is on the material aspect. In Sakam Karma is avoiding sinful activities and being purified. In Nishkam Karma is avoiding all kinds of material reactions. But that is now setting the stage of making further progress in spiritual realization. So this is essentially the progress on Gyan Marg. It began with karma when one performed Sakam Karma. Then the element of knowledge came in, so Nishkam Karma. Now the element of knowledge becomes even more prominent, and one gets to the stage of Brahman realization. So, Brahman realization manifests in two ways. One is Atmagyan, the understanding that I am not the body but the soul. And the second is Paramatma Gyan, understanding about the spiritual nature of the super soul or the Lord. So in Atma Gyan, one acquires Samadrishti because one sees the same spirit soul qualitatively in everybody. So one sees everybody with the same vision. Paramatma Gyan, one becomes friendly to everybody because not only do they see the same soul, they also see the worshipable Supreme Lord present in everybody's body. So not only they become samadrishti, but they also become friendly. So they are progressive states of Brahman realization. So generally, Brahman realization includes both these. There's not specifically a distinction made between Atmagyan and Paramatma Gyan. So in the next set of verses, Krishna will chart this progress from Nishkam Karma to the next stage of the yoga ladder, which is Brahmagyan. Verses 51 to 53. Buddhaya vishuddhya yukto dhrityatmanam niyamyocha shabdadin vishayam staktva ragadvesho viyudasya cha viviktasevi lagvashi yatvak kayamanasaha ध्यानयोग परो नित्यं वैराग्यं समुपाश्रितः अहंकारं बलं दर्पं कामं क्रोधं परिग्रहं विमुच्य निर्ममः शान्तो ब्रह्मभूताय कल्पते. Translation: Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance, and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self realization. So in this set of verses, we see that Krishna is charting the course from Nishkam Karma to Brahman realization. Right? So he talks about first he talks about being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination. So this is the Sakam Karma, or following the Varnashram Dharma, where one controls the mind with determination and intelligence, that I have to follow the scriptures and not my senses. Then he says, giving up objects of self gratification, being free from attachment and hatred. So this is Nishkam Karma. So the point that is being made is that the subsequent stages include the qualities of the previous stages. Right? So in Nishkam Karma is included Sakam, and in Brahma Bhuta stage is included Nishkam. So what is happening after the Nishkam stage? That the person now is is transcending the modes, even the mode of goodness. So with the cessation of ignorance, and Krishna gives us symptoms to understand how this person is now thinking. So, with the cessation of ignorance, by the freedom of false ego, pride, lust, anger, and possessions, there is also the cessation of sattva guna. Right? So, this is the continuing process or the maturing process of Gyan Sannyas, where one gives up even Gyan. Right? So, uh, without uh, so what happens is that one gives up both knowledge as well as ignorance. So, agyan as well as gyan, and giving up this, one attains Brahman realization. So, why does one give up gyan? So, the nature of gyan, as was explained earlier on, was elevating one to the higher modes, the mode of goodness. The nature of Gyan was taking one to the stage of Brahman realization, but it was also it also had in it the the nature of duality, right? Because uh, the prominent quality of Satogun is knowledge, and as long as one is in a material mode, one cannot enter into the spiritual realm. Right? So this is the process of jnana sannyas, that the person actually even gives up jnana, and what is the stage called brahmabhuvaya kalpate. Now he becomes qualified for reaching the stage of Brahman. Okay. So now we'll go to the next verse. 1854, this is a famous verse. Brahmabhuta prasannatma na sochati na kankshati samah sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed towards every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. So now this is the transition from Brahman realization to Bhakti. Right? So the first three lines are for the sake of continuity. So the previous verse, Krishna described the stage of Brahman realization, and these three lines are essentially summarizing or repeating them. That one who is transcendently situated at once realizes Supreme Brahman. Right? So this is Brahma Bhuvaya Kalpate. That's how the previous verse ended. Then he becomes joyful, he never laments or desires, equally disposed. All these are the qualities of one that has reached the stage of Brahman. But what happens next? Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. That now that person is qualified to progress to the next stage of of uh, uh, beyond Brahman realization, which is the execution of devotional service. So, Srila Prabhupada writes a powerful purport for this, in which he concludes by saying that in the Brahma Bhuta stage, uh, bhakti is attained very easily. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll flip it around. Krishna says that this Brahma Bhuta stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. So, uh, essentially, uh, uh, so now Krishna has laid the foundation for bhakti. He is also now going to show the independence of bhakti. Right. So while he's progressing up the yoga ladder, one may think that one has to go through this stage of sakam karma, nishkam karma, brahmabhuta to return to reach the stage of bhakti. But Krishna says that labate mat bhaktim labate param. So labate means that one attains bhakti. It does not mean that bhakti is produced. So what it means is that bhakti is always there. But when the person has been purified of the contamination and the impediments, then the bhakti is more easily attained. Right? So the point that Krishna makes is that while these are conducive to the attainment of bhakti, bhakti is not dependent on any of it. Right? Which is why Prabhupada in the purport he says that this Brahmabhuta stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. So Prabhupada is looking from the other perspective, that if one executes the stage of bhakti, then very easily one executes the Brahmabhuta stage. He does not have to go to the ascending stages of Sakam, Nishkam, Bhakta and Brahmabhuta. Next verse. Verse 55. Bhaktimam abhijanati yavanyaschaśmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion he can enter into the kingdom of God. So, after having walked Arjun up the, the rungs of the yoga ladder, Krishna has reached him to the stage of bhakti. Now, in 11 verses, Krishna will speak about his favorite topic, which is bhakti. So far he was talking about advancements through the process of karma and gyan, but now Krishna is going to speak about bhakti. Right? So the first glorification of bhakti, he says, is that this is the only way that one can understand him. Right? He says, Bhakti amam abhijanati. That the only way that one can understand Krishna is through the stage 2, through pure devotional service. What is the second glorification? That that is the only way that can one enter into the kingdom of God. Right. So he says that, and this now Krishna is now talking beyond Brahman realization. So he's talking about liberation in Vaikuntha or or Golok. So while karma and gyan can lead to bhakti, but bhakti is not dependent on them. So karma and gyan, they produce material detachment, which is conducive to spiritual attachment. But bhakti, it produces both. It produces spiritual attachment, and as a side product, it produces material detachment. That is why bhakti is independent. Right? And the glories of bhakti is that only through bhakti can one understand Krishna. And only through bhakti one attracts the protection by which one enters into Krishna's personal abode. So Prabhupada also cautions against misinterpreting this verse. So he says that one should not mistakenly think that the word vishate enters into me supports the monist theory that one becomes homogeneous with the impersonal Brahman. No, vishate means that one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in one's individuality to engage in his association and render devotional service unto him. Right? So the Mayavadis, they misinterpret Vishatemi to show that the perfection of Brahman realization is that one merges into the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada is clarifying this for us. So beginning from the next verse, we will see that Krishna, from verse 56 to 60, Krishna will talk about the characteristics of pure devotional service. So we'll stop at this point and resume our discussion in the next lecture. Thank you so much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.